Hello once again, it's Mr. Pete, your interweb shop teacher. Welcome back to Studio G, and this is indeed tips number 923, part 2 of a 3-part video regarding the beautiful South Bend 9-inch tool room lathe. And in this particular video, I'd like to continue what I did in part 1 in terms of the archaeology and the examining of this beautiful machine, and then I would like to get back to getting it all cleaned up, but I don't know what happened to my wife.
Did someone mention my name?
Pay no attention to the woman behind the curtain. I may be getting just a little bit off of the subject matter here, but I wanted to compare these two tailstocks, and they are both 9-inch tailstocks from South Bend, and this is for the lighter weight machine behind the black curtain that came from Florida, and it's a Model B 9-inch, and compare it, and it would be newer than this one, so let's compare it with the 9-inch tool room lathe. Look at how massive this cast iron, well, they're both cast iron, tailstock is in comparison. Now they both take a number 2 Morse taper center, so that isn't really any different, and the diameter of the quill isn't, but this tailstock weighs 20 pounds. This one weighs 12 pounds. Even the wrench here, that's aluminum, whereas this massive thing is probably forged steel, not cast iron, but forged steel. Look at the quill lock, heavy duty compared to this little wimpy thing. Now they both are old enough to where they have the reservoir here for the white lead or the CMD lubricant. And remember, years ago I even made that little dauber, we call it. There's a video on that, and that was used to put the oil onto the center. So when they came out with the heavy tin, it probably was based on this casting, but of course it would have to be a 1/2 inch larger in this direction for a 10-inch, but you can see the difference between lightweight and heavyweight machines, even within the beautiful South Bend family. Even the hand wheel is much lighter on this one than this massive thing. And look at the size of this as opposed to this. And there is a nice big oil hole here, and I don't see it on this. There are other differences as well, but I think that's all we need to look at for now. Tell me once, am I going into too great of a detail? Is this boring for you? You know, if I showed something like this to a class of high school students, there would be someone in the back row that would actually yawn really, really loud and incredibly rude. And that's the way our civilization is going. And I find it, oh, I'm sorry, I got off track again. But I just noticed this just now. Notice that there are 2 Gitz oilers. There's one here and one here, but of course it's missing here, but we still got the hole. There are none over here. And then I thought, well, I wonder if there's any on the back side. And sure enough, there's a couple of oilers, one here and one here. Well, where do they go? So when you oil the heavy-duty one here, you got oilers right here, and then the 2 on the bottom that I just showed you, and then there's oil grooves here. And notice the little hole here out of which the oil would come directly onto the bed or the ways. And that cannot happen over here, and in fact you just have to go ahead and oil your bed or your ways, and or I tend to loosen up the clamp a little bit and lift it and squirt some oil under there. But often you'll feel a groove right here where that has worn because there is no lubrication. Let me zero in. You will find this very interesting. You'll find it fascinating. If you don't, you're watching the wrong channel. Well, I just cleaned this oil groove out, and you can see the hole there. Now take a look at this. Now nobody has done this since Truman was in office, because nobody would have known that it was there. I didn't until 5 minutes ago. Did you? Put it in the comments if you did. If you've ever had one of these apart, you probably did. And then we need to clean the the oil hole. And make sure it's clean from this direction as well, so that the oil can flow. Isn't that awesome? They really went the extra mile back then, didn't they? You know what? I'm rather peeved at my wife for not cleaning these oil grooves out. We'll have to have words later on. But because of the fact that somebody either didn't oil those or attempted to oil these oilers and it was clogged, there is tremendous wear on the bottom of the tailstock, as you can see. Now when I take my knife and run it down here, you can see it catch on just a little bit of a shoulder. And that is the wear. And that is why sometimes the two centers, the headstock and tailstock center, do not line up vertically because of the wear here. And if this were to be machined, it would only exacerbate the problem. And some people attempt to shim and so on, but I don't think it's ever really good if you shim in here. And sometimes the wear is more on this end than this end, so the entire quill is at a bit of an angle. Let's talk a little bit about the quick change gearbox that was used on this machine. And this is the older style. I don't think they made it after about 1950, and is sometimes called the top lever or the single tumbler type. And 48 different threads are available with that gearbox, which is rather compact, isn't it? And in fact, this is where it mounts, and that will be shown in another video. Let me know if I give too much in the way of history, but this gearbox has a patent on it from 1906, and it was from Flatter, who also made lathes at that time, but I think they were done by about 1920, but South Bend made this under license for all of those years until they came out with a newer one in, I don't know, sometime in the 40s or 50s, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but I don't want to get too sidetracked with that because I thought it was interesting that a large company like South Bend would basically outsource this. However, I think they manufactured it in South Bend, Indiana, rather than having Flatter manufacture them and then just installing them on their lathes. I do not know that for sure. Put it in the comments if you do. Here's a little quiz for you. If you know the answer, put it in the comments. So in much of their literature and catalogs over the years and their nameplates, when you see their trademark here, there is the word twins. Do you know what that means? When I disassembled this 3 weeks ago at my friend's house, in order to take the box off of the lathe, I thought, no problem, I'll take off this little tray. And I love this little tray. It's just the neatest place to put your tool bits or your small items, even though it's quite small. So anyway, I took the 2 screws out, and when I did and removed this, and this is cast iron, quite heavy, look, there's no access. I thought I would be able to see inside the gearbox. A pouting disappointment for this old man. Well, here's the underbelly of the beast, and it's really not nearly as complicated as their more modern ones, but still you can see this would be expensive to produce. And again, we call it the single tumbler type or the top lever type. There's several different names for it. And I'm not going to really talk any more about this at this time, other than I'm surprised how clean it is in here. I did not clean it. Maybe my wife was cleaning this. If she did, she missed some sawdust right here. But remember that if you do not ever use compressed air in your shop to clean machines, there's not going to be any chips in here to speak of, because gravity makes the chips fall on the floor. The air hose makes the chips go everywhere. As far as I know, South Bend had 3 different gearboxes that they used. Now, I've already talked a little bit about this one, and there are 48 ratios here. That is, you can cut 48 different threads with this gearbox. Well, later on they came out with this one, and it's called the wide range, and it was used on the tool room lathe. Not all machines or all lathes had this available. There's a third one I'm going to show you here in a second, but this particular one has 70 threads available, so that's pretty amazing. And you can see why this one is so much bigger than this little thing. Let me show you some pictures in the old catalogs. This catalog page is from the 1956 catalog, and here is the 10-inch heavy. They don't call it a heavy here, but it essentially is. This is what replaced my green 9-inch lathe. It looks very similar, although it has a more of a swing, an extra inch. But notice that the gearbox is totally different, and that's the wide range gearbox that has 70 pitches of threads that it will cut. And on this page is a nice description of the wide range quick change box. And in review, this is the wide range gearbox. This is a page from the 1952 South Bend catalog. I'm not sure what year they introduced this, but on this page they call it the improved quick change gear mechanism, and this replaced the top lever type. However, it will only cut 48 threads as opposed to the larger one that I just showed you that will cut 70 different thread pitches. I got quite a kick out of this. You may too. This is the 1952 catalog, the 1956 catalog. So essentially, they look the same here, with the exception of earlier they called it the improved, and later on they said it's the much imitated quick change gearbox. So apparently other people were copying it, and I can find no records whatsoever of patents on that. So maybe they applied for a patent. Someone said that earlier one said patent applied for, but maybe they lied. Who knows? By the way, I have a standalone video where I totally disassembled and cleaned up and then reassembled this actual box right here. So if I can think of it, I'll put the name of that video right below. I just told you that South Bend made 3 different gearboxes. Well, I lied to you. There's a 4th one, and here it is, and this is on my South Bend mill, and I have shown that before. And when I first got the machine, I thought this was just one of the regular gearboxes taken from a lathe, but it is not. It's quite different. I think I spent a little bit too much time on these gearboxes, but just one last thing. On the new improved box here, the lubrication, the oiling could be done with just 2 Gitz oilers, one here and one here. And if you watch the video on this and examine it from the back side, there are very unique and intricate oil galleries that through just these 2 oilers here distribute the oil to just about every place that is needed in that gearbox, as opposed to this one where you have to oil it 1, 2, and then on this side 3, 4, 5, 6 oilers. Now that's not the end of the world that you have 4 more than this, but it is pretty unique, wouldn't you say? I really get a kick out of this heavy-duty switch, and actually I love it, but the thing weighs 15 pounds, including this hollow, very intricate casting made of cast iron. And my brother had this switch put on by Red Hetrick down at Monarch Electric. They were big Allen Bradley dealers. I talked about that Allen Bradley clock up in Milwaukee recently. I hope some of you remember that. But why did they do something so expensive? Think of the core box. This is hollow. How expensive that was to make. Why didn't they simply put the drum switch, the reversing switch, someplace along here, like many of their other machines? Let me show you an example. So on the 9-inch Model B, they simply put the switch right here with a little casting mounted right onto the V-way. Pretty darn handy too. Well, this actually looks kind of crude. When you look down this gaping hole here in the bed, it almost looks like they took a cutting torch and cut that out, but I suppose it was cast. And this, of course, is access for the flat belt because the motor is below, but it just looks so funny. And here's a pretty important feature here. This is a dowel pin to align the headstock onto the bed. And remember that I have to put the gearbox on before I put the headstock on because we have one hidden fastener here. When we put the headstock on, it covers it up and you no longer have access to it. Well, that about wraps up part 2 of this 3-part series on this wonderful 9-inch precision tool room lathe. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope the detail wasn't too great. And there's still one more part coming yet where I'm going to talk about the carriage and the headstock and then show you all the accessories. And that is before the videos where I actually reassemble this and talk about the different aspects and features of it at that time. Leave a thumbs up if you liked it, and please leave a comment. That helps the channel a lot. See you next time. And yes, in the follow-up video I'll be talking about the carriage and the headstock. Please join me.